The Forgotten World. The skies of Kilari Prime had once been a brilliant emerald green, a sight that inspired poetry and song across our civilization for thousands of years. Now they burned a toxic amber as our dying sun bombarded the planet with increasing radiation. I, Chief Ambassador Naleth, stood on the observation deck of our last functioning orbital station, watching as another evacuation ship departed with barely 200 of my people aboard. Incoming transmission from the Galactic Union Council. Ambassador, said Techner, my assistant. His voice betrayed the same exhaustion we all felt after 3 cycles of desperate pleas to our supposed allies. Put it through, I said, knowing already what the message would contain. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the 7 representatives of the most powerful species in our sector of the galaxy. The Volturi Counselor, with his characteristic blue-scaled face, spoke first. Ambassador Naleth, we have reviewed your latest petition for evacuation assistance. The Galactic Union's resources are currently stretched thin due to the Centauri conflict. We cannot divert additional ships to your sector at this time. I felt my inner membranes flush with anger, a physiological response my species developed to help regulate our body temperature under stress. Counselor, our star will go nova in less than 8 cycles. We have only evacuated 30% of our population. Without additional support, millions will perish. The Xanthi representative, a crystalline being who had once called herself my friend, dimmed her bioluminescent patterns in what passed for sympathy among her kind. The Union's astrophysicists have calculated that your people have at least 12 cycles, not 8. This should provide adequate time for your remaining ships to complete the evacuation. Our scientists disagree, I replied firmly. And even if it were 12 cycles, our ships are failing. 3 more broke down last rotation. We need help. The Volturi Counselor's expression hardened. Perhaps the Kilari should have invested more in their fleet and less in their arts and sciences when they had the chance. The transmission ended before I could respond. I closed my 4 eyes, fighting back the despair that threatened to overwhelm me. The Union had been clear from the beginning that they considered the Kilari expendable, a species whose contributions to galactic culture were deemed less valuable than our resource consumption. Techner's voice broke the silence. Ambassador, we've detected an unidentified vessel entering the system. It's not responding to standard Union protocols. My eyes snapped open. Pirates. It wouldn't be the first time scavengers had come to pick over what they thought was a dying civilization. I don't think so. The design is unfamiliar. Our database has no match. Within moments, I was in the command center, watching as our sensors tracked the approaching ship. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, sleek yet angular, with strange protrusions that defied conventional design logic. It wasn't especially large, perhaps capable of carrying a few hundred individuals at most. They're broadcasting a message, said our communications officer. Audio only, in what appears to be a modified version of Standard Union. Let's hear it, I ordered. A clear, confident voice filled the command center. Attention Kilari Orbital Station. This is Captain Maya Chen of the Earth Vessel Horizon. We understand your star is destabilizing, and your people are in danger. We're here to offer assistance. Earth. The word was vaguely familiar from obscure Union reports, a newly spacefaring species that had made contact with the galactic community barely 2 decades ago. They had declined Union membership, which most considered diplomatic suicide. Open a channel, I said, straightening my posture. First impressions mattered, even when facing extinction. This is Chief Ambassador Naleth of the Kilari. We appreciate your offer, Captain Chen, but I must express surprise. The humans have no formal relations with our people. We don't need a treaty to help a civilization in crisis, Ambassador, came the reply. Request permission to dock with your station. We have proposals that might interest you. I exchanged glances with my advisors. What could one small ship do that would make any difference? Still, we had nothing to lose. Permission granted, Captain. I'll meet you personally at Docking Bay 3. The human vessel maneuvered with surprising agility for its size, docking with our station as if it had been designed specifically for our ports, which was impossible, of course. I waited at the airlock with a small security detail, unsure what to expect. When the doors finally opened, I found myself facing 5 humans. They looked remarkably similar to several Union species, though with subtle differences that our xenobiologists would surely find fascinating under different circumstances. Captain Chen stepped forward. At least I assumed it was her from the central position, and the additional markings on her uniform. She had dark hair pulled back tightly and eyes that seemed to assess everything at once. Ambassador Naleth, thank you for meeting us. She extended a hand in what I recognized from our limited data as a human greeting ritual. I mimicked the gesture, allowing our hands to touch briefly. Captain, you mentioned assistance. I'm curious what one ship can offer that would make a meaningful difference to our situation. Captain Chen smiled. It's not just one ship, Ambassador. We're the advanced team. Earth is prepared to help evacuate your entire population. I stared at her, my membranes flushing involuntarily with shock. That's impossible. Even the Galactic Union, with its thousands of vessels, claims they cannot spare enough ships. The Union operates under different constraints than we do, said another human, who introduced himself as Dr. Elias Okafor, their chief science officer. May we show you something? I nodded, and they presented a small device that projected a holographic image of a massive fleet, hundreds of ships of varying designs. These vessels are currently being prepared for your evacuation, Captain Chen explained. They'll begin arriving within 2 days and can transport approximately 50,000 kilari each. The numbers were staggering. Why would humans do this when the Union abandoned us? What do you hope to gain? The captain's expression grew more serious. The Union abandoned you because they calculated the cost-benefit ratio and found it unfavorable. Humans don't think that way. We still remember what it means to face extinction. There must be a catch, said Techner, voicing the suspicion all of us felt. No catch, replied Chen. Though we do have a proposal for after the evacuation. Earth has identified several potential worlds for your people to resettle. One in particular is in our territory, a planet we call Kepler 452 bits. It's remarkably similar to your homeworld before your sun began destabilizing. I felt a flutter of hope, quickly suppressed by political reality. The Union would never allow an entire species to settle outside their jurisdiction. They consider us their responsibility, even if they've abandoned us in practice. Dr. Okafor smiled. That's where human diplomatic creativity comes in. But first, let's focus on saving your people. Time is short, Ambassador. Over the next rotation, I met with my council to discuss the human proposal. Opinions were divided. Some saw it as our only chance for survival. Others feared it was too good to be true. They must want something, argued Councillor Vrek, our oldest and most cautious leader. Access to our genetic database, our cultural archives. Perhaps they hope to exploit our biochemistry expertise. Does it matter? Countered Councillor Malus, who had lost her entire family when one of our colony moons had been hit by a solar flare the previous cycle. If they save even half our population, isn't that better than what the Union offers? In the end, desperation won out over caution. We agreed to the human proposal, though I insisted on reviewing their evacuation plans in detail. The next day, I met with Captain Chen and her team in our Strategic Command Center. They laid out a comprehensive evacuation strategy that impressed even our most experienced logisticians. We've analyzed your population centers and transportation infrastructure, explained Lieutenant Sarah Nguyen, their operations specialist. Your people will be organized into groups of 10,000, each assigned to a specific gathering point. From there, our ground transport vehicles will move them to these 15 spaceports. She highlighted locations across our world map, many of which were facilities we had abandoned due to lack of spacecraft. What about the radiation? Asked our chief medical officer. Many of the northern regions are already experiencing dangerous levels. We've developed radiation shielding specifically calibrated to your sun's emission spectrum, Dr. Okafor said. Each transport will be protected and will provide temporary shelters with the same technology for waiting areas. As they continued outlining their plan, I found myself both impressed and increasingly suspicious. Everything seemed too perfect, too well prepared. It was as if they had been planning this for years, not the weeks since our star's deterioration had become known to the wider galaxy. Captain, I interrupted, how is it possible that you have developed such a detailed plan in such a short time? And how can humanity afford to divert so many resources to help a species you've never even met? Captain Chen exchanged glances with her team before answering. Ambassador, the truth is we've been monitoring your situation for some time. Earth has a different approach to galactic affairs than the Union. We've been watching how they treat emerging and vulnerable species. You've been spying on the Union? I asked, shocked at the implications. We'd prefer to call it independent assessment, Chen replied with a small smile. What we saw convinced us that we needed to forge our own path. The Union abandoned your people because they determined your cultural and scientific contributions didn't justify the resources required to save you. We fundamentally reject that calculation. I stared at her, trying to process this revelation. So humans value all life equally. That seems impractical for a spacefaring civilization. Not equally, perhaps, admitted Dr. Okafor, but we don't reduce it to a resource equation either. Humanity remembers what it's like to face catastrophe alone. We've nearly destroyed ourselves more than once. Before I could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Technor rushed into the command center. Ambassador, Union ships have entered the system. 3 battle cruisers and a diplomatic vessel. They're demanding immediate communication. I felt my heart sink. The Union had finally decided to pay attention to us at precisely the wrong moment. Captain Chen's expression hardened. It seems our time for planning has run out, Ambassador. You have a choice to make. The unexpected saviors. The Galactic Union delegation didn't wait for my permission to board our station. They arrived with the practiced efficiency of those accustomed to power, flanked by security drones that hovered menacingly at shoulder height. High Counselor Zelnak of the Vulture led the group, his blue scales gleaming under our station's lights. Ambassador Naleth, he said with forced cordiality, we've detected unauthorized vessels in your system. His 4 pupilled eyes shifted to Captain Chen and her team. Ah, humans. I should have guessed. Captain Chen stepped forward with remarkable confidence. High Counselor, I wasn't aware the Kilari required permission to receive visitors. Zelnak's scales rippled, a sign of irritation I'd learned to recognize over years of negotiations. They don't. But when an unregistered fleet approaches Union territory, it becomes our concern. Unregistered fleet? I asked, glancing at Chen. Our evacuation ships, she confirmed. The first wave entered the system 10 minutes ago. That's what triggered the Union response. Zelnak's diplomatic veneer cracked. Ambassador Naleth, whatever these humans have promised you, understand that accepting their help has consequences. The Kilari are under Union protection. Protection. I couldn't contain my bitterness. Is that what you call watching us die while citing resource allocation protocols? The High Counselor's expression hardened. The Union makes difficult decisions for the greater good of all member species. We've explained that the resources required to evacuate your entire population would compromise our defense capabilities against the Centauri. Captain Chen cleared her throat. Forgive me, Counselor, but if humans can spare these resources without compromising our security, what does that say about Union priorities? It says that humans are reckless and short-sighted. Zelnak snapped. Your species has barely achieved interstellar flight. You have no understanding of the complex balance of galactic politics. I stepped between them, sensing the tension escalating. High Counselor, the Kilari Council has voted to accept humanity's assistance. With respect, we're exercising our sovereign right to ensure our people's survival. Zelnak's eyes narrowed. "Ambassador, I request a private word." I nodded and led him to my adjacent office. As soon as the door closed, his diplomatic restraint vanished entirely. "You fool," he hissed. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? The humans aren't helping you out of altruism. They're using your crisis to establish themselves as a competing power to the Union." "Even if that's true," I countered, "they're still saving my people while you watched us prepare for extinction." "We weren't going to let you go extinct," Zelnak said, his voice lowering. "The truth is, we've been developing controlled evacuation plans that would have preserved the essential elements of Kilari society: your genetic diversity, cultural artifacts, key scientists, and artists." I stared at him in dawning horror. "Essential elements. You were planning to cherry-pick which Kilari deserved to live. It's called preservation triage, Ambassador. We've done it before with species facing extinction events. It's how we maintain galactic stability while preserving what matters most." What matters most? I felt my inner membranes flush dark with rage. "Who are you to decide which of my people deserve to survive? This is why we don't explain these policies to affected species," Zelnak muttered. "You're too emotionally invested to see the logic." Before I could respond, alarms blared again. Techner's voice came through the communication system. "Ambassador, we have a situation. Union forces are attempting to dock at our primary evacuation hubs on the surface." I rushed back into the command center with Zelnak close behind. The main display showed tactical feeds from our planet's surface, where sleek Union crafts were descending toward our largest spaceports. "What is the meaning of this?" I demanded. Zelnak's expression revealed nothing. "Security protocol. We're securing the evacuation points to ensure orderly processing." Captain Chen stepped forward, her posture tense. "They're blocking our evacuation ships, Ambassador. This isn't about security, it's about control." "High Counselor," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, "recall your forces immediately. The Kilari did not request this intervention." "I'm afraid I can't do that, Ambassador," Zelnak replied. "The Union Council has declared a humanitarian oversight emergency on Kilari Prime. Under Section 87 of the Membership Charter that authorizes us to assume direct control of the evacuation process. A process you weren't even attempting until the humans arrived," I pointed out bitterly. One of the human officers, Lieutenant Nguyen, approached Captain Chen and whispered something. Chen's expression shifted subtly before she addressed me. "Ambassador, we anticipated this response. Our ships are already adjusting to secondary evacuation points, but we need your authorization to proceed with alternate protocols." I didn't hesitate. "Granted. Do whatever is necessary to save my people." Chen nodded and spoke into her communication device. Within moments, the tactical display showed dozens of smaller human crafts descending through our atmosphere toward scattered locations across the planet. Rural areas, small townships, even some of our wilderness preserves. "What are they doing?" demanded Zelnak. "Adapting," I replied simply. Over the next 12 hours, chaos and hope intermingled across Kilari Prime. The Union forces controlled our major spaceports, processing Kilari citizens according to some predetermined criteria that became increasingly obvious. Young scientists, cultural leaders, genetic repositories, all were being given priority, while ordinary citizens were told to wait for transport that never seemed to arrive. Meanwhile, the humans implemented what they called distributed evacuation, small vessels landing in communities across the planet, taking anyone who wished to leave regardless of status or profession. Families remained together. Villages departed as complete units. The elderly weren't separated from their communities. From the orbital station, I watched both operations unfold with mixed emotions. The Union was saving Kilari, yes, but only those they deemed valuable. The humans were saving everyone they could reach, without distinction. "The contrast is quite revealing, isn't it?" said Dr. Okafor, who had joined me at the observation window. Below us, The amber atmosphere of our dying world was dotted with the lights of ascending spacecraft, mostly human vessels now, as they had quickly outpaced the Union's more centralized efforts. Why are humans doing this? I asked quietly. The truth, please. The scientist considered me for a moment. Several reasons. Some are idealistic. Many humans genuinely believe that helping others without expectation of return is morally right. Some are practical. We hope the Kilari will be valuable allies and friends. And some, he hesitated. Some are political, he admitted. Earth's leadership observed how the Union treats its vulnerable members. We found it concerning. Your situation presented an opportunity to demonstrate an alternative approach to interstellar relations. So we are a statement, I concluded. Your survivors, Okafor corrected. The statement is a beneficial side effect. Before I could respond, Techner rushed into the observation deck, his face bearing the unmistakable patterns of alarm. Ambassador, Union forces have deployed inhibitor fields around their controlled spaceports. Any vessel attempting to breach those spaces is being disabled. What about the human ships? I asked, dreading the answer. 3 have been affected so far. They managed soft landings, but they're stranded, and there are still thousands of Kilari in those zones. I turned to Okafor. Did you anticipate this too? He grimaced. Not specifically. This technology wasn't in our intelligence briefings. Captain Chen joined us, her face grim. Ambassador, we need to evacuate you and your station personnel immediately. Our sensors indicate your son's deterioration has accelerated. We have less than 3 days, not the 8 your scientists predicted. I felt a cold dread settle into my core. 3 days? How is that possible? Union scientists knew this, said a new voice. We turned to see High Counselor Zelnak entering the observation deck, flanked by 2 security officers. Our latest models showed the accelerated timeline 2 cycles ago. And you didn't tell us. I was beyond outrage now, into a strange, cold clarity. It simplified the trade process, he replied without shame. Less time meant we could focus on preserving only what was most essential of Kilari civilization. Captain Chen stepped forward, her hand near what I now recognized as a weapon. Counselor, I strongly suggest you order those inhibitor fields deactivated. There are still millions of Kilari in those zones who won't survive if they're not evacuated in the next 72 hours. Zelnak regarded her coldly. Human vessels can dock at Union-controlled ports if they submit to our evacuation protocols, meaning you'll still choose who lives and who dies. Chen translated. The standoff was interrupted by Dr. Okafor, who had been examining data on his personal device. Captain, I believe we have an option. The inhibitor fields have a specific frequency range. If we recalibrate our transport ship's shield harmonics, we might be able to counteract the effect. How quickly can we implement this? Chen asked. For the smaller vessels, hours. For the main transports. He shook his head. Too long. But there's another option. He handed her the device, showing her something I couldn't see. She studied it, then looked up with renewed determination. It's risky. Everything about this mission has been risky, he replied. Chen turned to me. Ambassador, we need to move quickly. The Union is controlling the main spaceports, but there's a third option we haven't yet deployed. What option? I asked. Orbital evacuation pods. Small, one-way vessels designed for rapid atmospheric exit. They're not comfortable, but they're safe. We can drop them directly into the inhibitor zones and bypass the Union blockade. Zelnak stepped forward. That would violate Union security protocols. Any unauthorized vessels entering secured zones will be considered hostile acts. Would you really fire on evacuation pods? I challenged him. His scales rippled in what might have been discomfort or anger. The Union prioritizes order, Ambassador. Chaos costs lives. So does bureaucracy, Captain Chen countered. She turned to me. Your decision, Ambassador. We'll follow your lead. I needed only seconds to decide. Deploy the pods. Get my people out of there. All of them. The next 48 hours were the most intense of my life. The human ships released thousands of evacuation pods that descended like silver raindrops onto the inhibitor zones. Each pod could carry up to 20 Kilari and was pre-programmed to ascend to the growing fleet of human vessels in orbit. The Union, faced with the choice of either firing on obviously unarmed evacuation pods or standing down, chose an intermediate path. They maintained the inhibitor fields but did not actively prevent the pods from landing or taking off. Instead, they doubled down on their own evacuation efforts, suddenly finding the capacity to transport far more Kilari than they had previously claimed possible. The competition between human and Union evacuation operations saved millions of lives. By the time our sun began its final, catastrophic phase, over 90% of the Kilari population had been evacuated, a miracle compared to the 30% we had managed on our own, or the essential 15% the Union had secretly planned to save. I stood on the bridge of the human flagship, an enormous vessel called the Earth United, watching through shielded viewports as the final evacuation ships cleared the Kilari system. Captain Chen stood beside me, her face showing the strain of the past 3 days. "Your people performed a miracle," I told her quietly. She shook her head. "We just did what should have been done from the beginning." Behind us, High Counselor Zelnak had been permitted to join the observation, under what the humans called diplomatic courtesy, but was effectively detention. His earlier arrogance had faded as he watched the human evacuation succeed where Union protocols would have failed. "You've started something you don't understand," he said to Chen. "The Union has maintained galactic stability for millennia through careful management of resources and populations. This intervention undermines principles that prevent chaos." Captain Chen turned to face him fully. "Your principles were allowing millions to die unnecessarily. If that's stability, perhaps the galaxy needs a little chaos." Zelnak's scales darkened. "The Union Council will not forget this. There will be consequences." "Good," said Chen simply. "We want them to remember. We want every species in the Union to know there's an alternative to your utilitarian calculations." I interrupted what was becoming a philosophical debate. "What happens now? Where will my people go?" "As we discussed," Chen replied, "we've prepared Kepler 452 bits for immediate settlement. It's a beautiful world, Ambassador, similar gravity to Kilari Prime, breathable atmosphere, abundant water. The ecosystem is compatible with your biology according to our simulations, and its status with the Union." I asked, glancing at Zelnak. "It lies outside Union space," Chen explained. "Earth claimed it during our early explorations, before we made contact with the wider galactic community." Zelnak made a dismissive sound, a primitive claim with no standing in galactic law. "Perhaps," Chen acknowledged, "but we have established settlements there, and the Union has historically respected established presence, even before formal recognition. I considered the implications, so my people would be under human protection, not Union jurisdiction." "We prefer to think of it as partnership," Chen corrected. "Earth doesn't seek subjects or dependents. We propose an alliance between equals, humans, and Kilari working together to build something new." From the viewports, we could see the first flash of energy as our sun began its final collapse. Soon, Kilari Prime would be consumed, along with all the history and heritage we couldn't evacuate. The thought brought deep sadness, but also a strange sense of possibility. "What makes you think the Kilari would choose humanity over the Galactic Union?" Zelnak asked me. "For all your complaints, Ambassador, the Union represents stability, established trade networks, mutual defense agreements. These humans offer uncertainty and isolation." I looked at the High Counselor, a being I had once respected and even admired for his diplomatic skill. Now I saw him clearly, a bureaucrat who had calculated the value of my species and found us expendable. "They offer something more valuable," I replied. "They offer respect, not as resources to be allocated or preserved based on utility, but as people worthy of survival simply because we exist. I turned to Captain Chen. I cannot speak for all Kilari, but I believe our people will choose partnership with humanity. We have much to learn from a species that would expend so much to save strangers. In the days that followed, as our massive evacuation fleet made its way toward the new Kilari homeworld, I had time to reflect on the profound shift in my people's future. We had lost our ancestral home but gained something perhaps more valuable, a new beginning built on genuine alliance rather than calculated dependency. The Union representatives eventually departed, making thinly veiled threats about trade sanctions and diplomatic isolation. But as they left, I noticed something unexpected. Representatives from 3 other Union species requested permission to remain with our fleet. They were observers, they claimed, sent to report on the resettlement process. But I recognized the look in their eyes. They had witnessed something remarkable, a direct challenge to the Union's cold pragmatism. They were questioning assumptions they had accepted for generations. As our new sun came into view weeks later, a stable yellow star, much like the one humans evolved under, I stood again with Captain Chen on the observation deck. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" I asked her. She smiled. "Of many things, Ambassador. A new home for your people, a new alliance in this part of the galaxy, and perhaps a new way of thinking about what matters in civilization." Below us, the beautiful blue-green world that would become our new home grew larger in the viewport. It wasn't Kilari Prime. Nothing could replace what we had lost. But as I watched the first shuttle descend toward its surface, carrying the advance team that would prepare for our arrival, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Hope, not just for my people's survival, but for a future where the worth of a civilization wasn't measured by its utility to others, but by its capacity for compassion when faced with another's need. The humans had a saying, Captain Chen told me. The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. By that measure, humanity had proven itself greater than the mighty Galactic Union, and the galaxy would never be the same.